Good morning, or good afternoon, sorry. Susan Bragagnolo. I'm with Parsons, and I'll be moderating this panel discussion today. This is Energy 2. Full disclosure, I'm new to Parsons. I've been there less than a year. I spent 26 years with Pacific Gas and Electric Company in various positions, so wanted to mention that before we get started. And the other thing I wanted to say before we got started was, how about those San Francisco Giants? So we have 4 panelists with us today. The first is Richard White from the CPUC. The second is Kent Palmerton of PURPA. Third, David Rubin of Pacific Gas and Electric. And we have Barbara Hale from the San Francisco PUC. The topic today is really looking forward, talking about the future of energy. So, really, what are our options? Given the state that we're in, given looking out, into 2050, 2100, that sounds a long time away, but I want to get us thinking really forward-thinking as we talk about this discussion. When I was asked to moderate this panel, I did a little research, a little background, and I pulled up a paper that was written by the California Energy Commission Climate Change Center, and it talked a lot about the climate change impacts in the Bay Area. So thinking about warming that may happen with climate change, thinking about precipitation differences, and that's could be more precipitation, it could be less precipitation, it could be precipitation that results in less snowpack, which has a big impact on water and water storage. Wildfires and how that might lead to vulnerabilities in our transmission lines, and sea level rises and how that might impact some of the power generating facilities that ring the bay. So those are just some seed thoughts to get you going. We'll have each panelist present a brief overview of their opinion, just like all the other panel discussions, and then open it up for Q&A and roundtable. And I just want to encourage you to make sure as questions come up and come to mind, please fill out those blue cards and hand them in so we can have a good, robust Q&A after our panelists talk. So our first speaker, Richard White, is a senior policy analyst with the California CPUC. His emphasis is on energy water nexus, grid planning and optimization, and grid safety.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here for this meeting. It's been an interesting conference so far. I've met a bunch of people who I have known before, and that I've met a couple of new people, and it's been interesting to hear the different perspectives. I'm relatively new at the PUC. I've only been there a few months, but my background is in risk analysis and also energy grid planning and also decision analysis. And so my perspective has really been, how do we think about working with a number of different agencies and across a number of different resources and helping, finding ways for these organizations to work well together while also setting the objectives of the different stakeholders in a way that's meaningful. So one of the things that I thought about when I came to the PUC is how does a PUC really think through a problem? And so there's a really high-level diagram that I think a lot of people have talked about today, in terms of how do you make the trade-offs. And there are the typical trade-offs that we always think of. Cost is always one of the ones. Reliability. From the different industries, reliability means different things. For the electric utilities, it's typically, how much the service is the service on at all? Do the lights actually work? For water, it's really more of quality. But nevertheless, there's always a reliability measure. There's also the environmental impacts, and again, from water, it depends on, the amount of water that's being used or consumed, and for the electric utility industry, it's typically greenhouse gases. But there's typically some trade-off that happens, and the thing that's interesting is that there's really not just one, you're not trading one off of the other, you're trading off all three simultaneously. And the problem I think we're having in a number of the industries is that the institutions are set up to deal with just a trade-off between two at a time. And so we're really thinking of the problem as a dilemma as opposed to a trilemma. So typically in the Public Utilities Commission, a number of the processes that go through and the hearings that occur are typically trying to resolve an issue around either how do we trade off environmental impacts versus cost. And then the reliability comes in as just the static factor that sits on top of it, almost like a regulation. In fact, exactly like a regulation in many senses. But the basic problem is that the real issue that people are dealing with on in a day-to-day basis is we need to reduce the cost, but we also want to capture this benefit. A different proceeding will have a different emphasis. Their emphasis might be between trading off costs with reliability. When we're talking about the resource adequacy specifically, people are thinking that we want to make sure we are adequately supplying the grid at least cost, but environmental impacts are really secondary. So I think we want to start thinking about how can we get away from the dilemma approach, and that dilemma approach is really institutionalized in how we set up the proceedings, not only at the PUC, but I think in a number of other institutions. And so that's a bit of my perspective about thinking sort of a game-changing way we think about organizing institutions and thinking through a problem. But I also wanted to give a little bit of background about where we are in terms of, okay, where does this all come out at the end of the day? Because we have made these choices, they're implicit choices, and they do have consequences. So in California, whether implicitly or explicitly, we have relatively high electricity prices compared to the rest of the nation. And there are many reasons for why the prices are where they are right now. Some of them have to do with things that have nothing to do with regulation. The cost of living in California is just high compared to the rest of the nation. There's, one of these outliers is from Hawaii. They import a lot of fuel from outside of Hawaii. It makes it very expensive. And same on the environment, we're doing exactly opposite. We're actually one of the better states in terms of our emissions. There's the emissions from the electricity providers in the state of California. So we're much better than most other states. And then from the reliability standpoint, we're about average. We have about what most other states have. And I'm using the western area as our proxy for measuring reliability. It's a bit difficult to measure reliability. There are many different types of measures, and so you can cut it a lot of different ways. But we're about average. So we've implicitly made this choice, not explicitly necessarily, because there are many factors that drive each of these factors, but we're trading off cost and the environment. And reliability is essentially neutral. And so I think one of the things we want to think about a little bit more carefully is are we in the right place? I know, I've put down here the retail price of electricity, but it's not necessarily, that may not be the best metric for understanding what the cost trade-off is. We think about electric services as well. So we can think that maybe we shouldn't be talking about the price of electricity, but we should talk about a bill and what a consumer actually pays for. So the cost, when you start thinking in those terms, you're rolling in technological advancement, energy efficiency programs, conservation programs are not included when you think about just cost. So we changed the metric to think about a bill. Now we're including the technologies and also the behavioral impacts of conservation programs. Similarly, in the environmental issues in terms of the emissions, we don't really think too much about what are the technologies behind that. But that's greatly impacted by our choices about what types of plants we do incent. Going forward, a couple of people have mentioned that we're really in a dramatic change right now. We're currently at 20% renewables, and that's approximately where we are right now. But we're really moving pretty aggressively towards 33% renewables. As of this year, we're approximately 3 times more renewables generating technologies being installed than conventional technologies. So 3 to 1 renewables to conventionals. So it's really shifting our entire mix in the electricity grid. And this is, so I think thinking through how we make these trade-offs between renewables, their cost, their reliability, and the environmental impact is going to be key. So that's really what I wanted to say, and I hope I get some questions and see where it goes from there. Thank you.
So our second speaker is Kent Palmerton. Kent is the Executive Management Consultant at the Power and Water Resources Pooling Authority. Kent has over 34 years of experience in the electric industry, both private and public. You look like you've run the gamut of the whole companies that you've worked for: generation and transmission development, trading and risk management, corporate communication, government, and regulatory affairs.
Yes, thank you. And let's see if we can get the timer running so that I don't get flashed with that. I'm a consultant in the energy business. My primary client is the Power and Water Resources Pooling Authority, where I act as their general manager. It's a group of irrigation and water districts that we serve at retail, about 100 megawatts. And I have been involved in the industry for quite a number of years, from Pacific Northwest and then down here in California. In full disclosure, I do have a small company that has FERC market-based rate authority. A group of folks bid on trying to serve the city of San Francisco, their CCA activities. And since then, the folks in San Francisco, we've rebranded and called ourselves GreenSpark, and we're involved with trying to help other energy folks in the CCA business. So one of the things that I wanted to do today is really play on the question of water and energy nexus and try and get an answer a little bit to the questions that the panel offered, which was prioritize conservation or prioritize supply increases. And what I wanted to focus on is renewable technologies and the penetration of renewable generation in our generation mix. The water side spends a lot of time with in conduit hydro and digester gas renewable generation. But I want to talk more about the big picture items with the solar and wind generation. And since we were only allowed a couple of slides, pictures are worth 1,000 words, so we'd start with that. And on your left, you know, the nexus, you can't have power without water, and you can't have water without power. Obviously, we're sitting in the rain and a thunderstorm. But what really I wanted to make point with is here in the Bay Area, it's challenging for the type of typical renewable generation that you're looking at, wind generation and solar. Obviously, this is Bay Area in a thunderstorm, and then the Bay Area in just clearing up after clouds and a stormy day, just turning to darkness. First, to make sure, as I go through with some observations here, that these are my comments, not those of the board of the Power and Water Resources Pooling Authority. But I'm not here to throw cold water on renewable development. I want to show that the renewable development and the penetration of renewables to 33% to 40%, and some of you are looking at being 100% renewable. That might be a goal of cities, communities, or water agencies. That to have that level of penetration of renewables in our generation supply chain presents challenges, and those challenges require solutions. And I think that's where we need to focus, is the solutions that would need to come to play to make sure that the renewables actually have a place that fit comfortably within our system. Load service. If we talk about load service as either being adequate or security in terms of the reliability of load service, I think it's important to contrast those two concepts with the intermittency of renewable resources. I mean, fundamentally, let's start with the fact that we're in a structured market. And that means a structured market is that the power, not only in the Western system or the 11 Western states, is all intermingled, but for each individual district or city or community or even electric utility, even if you were to have 100% renewables in your portfolio, imagine a bathtub, if you will, that's filled with water. That's the electric system. The faucets are the generators. The drains are the load. If the green faucet-colored water is renewables and the brown is natural gas and the black is coal, the color of the water isn't green when it goes out of a drain in San Francisco. It's going to be the same color as all the water. It's mixed up. It's brown. It's ugly. It's dirty, because green power cannot produce green kilowatt hours that are consumed at your location. You're consuming electricity that's generated across the western states and clearly across California. And so when we talk about adequacy and security, we need to know that renewables aren't available all the time. It does get dark once in a while here in California, typically every day. And that means the solar projects aren't going to generate. And in the San Francisco Bay Area in particular, it's challenging. There's not a large wind resource except for Altamont Pass. It has its environmental issues. It's not a great solar resource except for bright sunny days, which doesn't happen all the time in certain places. So you have trade-offs between distributed generation on rooftops for solar versus large central station solar that you might, for cost effectiveness, put in the deserts. So one of the things that it brings to the point is on a footprint basis, large commercial available solar, 10s, 20s, 30s, 100 megawatts worth of solar projects, or large wind generation projects are typically a long way from the load, typically away from the Bay Area. What you usually see, of course, is pictures like you see on the right-hand side. These are all during the summertime or during the daylight. Of course, when you look at wind turbines, they're never running because that's kind of when you take the picture of them. They may be spinning, but the picture is taken such. In 2006, during the summertime, July, I forget when it was, 16th or 18th, we had a heat spell. It was 100 degrees in San Francisco and 102 around the country, around California. Those wind turbines, in fact, were not running. Okay, almost 1,000 megawatts that were installed. 1 or 2 turbines were going around. There was no wind because it was a heat spell. Yes, you had solar, but from a security standpoint and an adequacy standpoint, renewables present a big challenge. If it's a long way away from load center, it means transmission is going to need to bring it home. So transmission in your backyard, NIMBY, it's very difficult, but it's essential as we look forward to the penetration of renewable resources. When we talk about solutions to the challenges that renewables bring to the system, storage is, I think, one of the best and greatest opportunities that we have. Storage is very difficult. Obviously, we have the same picture here on the right. Now the turbines are going. Sunshine, solar is being generated. But as you can see, this is a picture of San Francisco at nighttime with the lights on. If the wind isn't blowing and the solar isn't generating power, how are you going to get the lights to stay on? It means there has to be a compromise. You either have to have storage, you have to have thermal backup, or some other type of generation. The solutions that we have for the penetration for renewables is a compromise. You can't be 100% green 100% of the time. It's not going to happen. For almost every renewable resource that is in place, there has to be a thermal backup in some place for security and adequacy. Distributed generation versus central station, there's always a compromise there. It's going to require transmission. The storage is very interesting. Lots of way to handle storage. Thermal storage, ceramic, mechanical, or chemical storage. Batteries are chemical. Ceramic might be thermal energy storage in buildings or residences. There's other mechanical storage capabilities are things like compressed gas storage. But as I said, there's a compromise. Remember a combustion turbine, the jet engine that you saw that the East Bay Mud has a compressor, compresses the gas, you put fuel in it, it ignites, it burns, it turns a generator, and you have waste heat. Well, compressed natural gas or compressed gas storage is when the renewables are running, you compress gas. When they're not running, you take that gas, and instead of having a compressor that uses energy in the combustion turbine. You take the gas, and it's already compressed. You ignite it, and it burns. But that's renewable mixed with natural gas. So it's a compromise. It's not renewable 100% of the time. Okay? Batteries are also very interesting in terms of storage, and so is the water industry. Storage comes from using renewables to charge electric cars, and the storage is the electric car that has the battery. So if you have hundreds of them or hundreds of thousands or millions of them, just like those of you that were around the 70s with gas tanks, when there was the gas shortages, well, what happened is all the storage of the gasoline in tanks, fuel tanks of cars, was cut in half because nobody would go less than half of a tank. And so it was a huge storage vehicle for gasoline in people's cars. Well, we can have a huge storage place for electricity as batteries in battery cars, or hydrogen in hydrogen cars, or electric devices. And when it comes to storage with the water side for Nexus, if you can treat water when the wind is blowing and not treat it when the wind and solar isn't, then you've actually stored that water treated, and you've used electricity and effectively stored that electricity in that treated water. So that means you have to increase your total capability of the size of your water treatment facilities. So, conclusion, needs to be a compromise. You can't be 100% green 100% of the time. You need to have a portfolio of technologies. And as you heard before, you have to prepare, I think you have to prepare for a very expensive future. Cap and trade, renewables, the backup, the transmission, the storage, the infrastructure changes. It is going to take a much bigger bite out of all of our budgets.
So our next speaker is David Rubin. David is the Director of Service Analysis at PG&E, where he's been there on and off for about 30 years.
Way too long.
Took a few trips other places. He's responsible for economic development and distributed generation.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. As we get a little further down the panel, I think Barbara and I are painfully aware of the fact that we're standing between you and first pitch. So I'm going to make my comments very, very short. Is it queued up?
Push the button.
Push the button. Fantastic. I kept to my two sides as I was instructed, although I have a covered side that doesn't really count. So the question we were asked to address is prioritizing conservation or prioritizing supply. So the short answer to the question is yes. I'll provide a little more detail and then leave as much time as possible for questions. The first slide speaks really to the prioritizing conservation part of the equation. So you could really call this in many respects an all of the above policy. Is anybody else having problems with this? Exactly. Thanks. Okay, thank you. And I know you're not going to be able to read this, but again, I had to compress everything on two slides. So what it does highlight is the fact that we do have a large number of different types of programs that are designed to help us work with our customers to essentially lower and or manage energy use or manage the environmental impact of energy use. And so briefly starting at the left-hand side, upper part of the slide, we have a fairly large number of demand response programs. I've highlighted a couple of them here. And again, you're probably not going to be able to see the details. I'm happy to provide copies of this. But demand response programs, in many respects, getting back to Kent's comments, are in some respects the equivalent of storage, in the sense that if customers can actually in real time modulate their consumption through various strategies, either reducing demand as needed based on supply-demand, real-time supply-demand situations, or in some instances, and actually this is what we're really trying to push towards, putting in place more permanent load-shaping types of strategies where you might, for example, integrate storage in the production of whatever process you're producing. It'll allow us to better balance supply and demand on a long-term sustained basis. I don't have a slide showing this, but PG&E's system, for example, is fairly peaky, and by that meaning we need a lot of generation capacity and other forms of supply to meet a peak demand that is, practically speaking, only in place for a relatively small percentage of the total number of hours in a year, roughly 5%. So if we were successful at managing that upper 5% of electricity demand, we'd be able I believe, to retire roughly 25% of the generating capacity that we have. And so demand response is a critical approach to, again, working with customers to allow that type of flexibility, either in real time or on longer term load shifting types of strategies. Energy efficiency, which is off to the right, are, again, different types of programs where we work with our customers to manage energy consumption by reducing use through more efficient technologies primarily, but also different types of behavioral changes to get customers accustomed to turning off light switches and reducing usage that they just simply may not need in their day-to-day lives. And so we have a large number of programs that are directed toward different types of technologies, different market segments, commercial, residential, industrial, agricultural customers, as well as different sort of sequences in the chain of production of goods and services that use energy. So we have a number of programs that are directed toward upstream, meaning helping manufacturers produce more efficient products, as well as downstream, which is putting financial incentives in front of customers to help them choose more efficient products, and just about everything else in between. The sum total of the money that we spend on the energy efficiency programs on an annual basis is roughly about $400 million. Demand response, about $150 million a year. And then the bottom of the slide highlights a number of the programs that we have to help customers that want to generate their own energy from on-site use. And again, Kent had mentioned that East Bay Mud, in fact, does that at a couple of their facilities. We provide financial incentives for those types of projects as well, whether they're solar projects, again, on the customer side of the meter, small-scale microturbines that might use renewable fuels. We actually, if you look at the far right side of the bottom, we have financial incentive programs for customers to put in pressure reduction turbines that might, for example, be inserted in a gas pipeline or a steam line or even a water line in order to essentially act as a pressure reduction valve but generate electricity at the same time. And these programs, by the way, the ones at the bottom, also represent about $150 million a year. So if we add this up, you come up to roughly about $700 million a year that we're spending on various types of programs that are targeted toward helping our customers manage their energy use and or manage the environmental impacts of their energy use. So onto the supply side, again, my apologies for the size, but I do want to highlight the fact that we do have a number of different types of programs that are shown at the very top of the slide to either, again, encourage customers to generate their own energy from on-site renewable systems. So those are the top 5 orange bars. And or we procure a lot of renewable energy on our quest to meet, as Richard had mentioned, the state's 33% renewable portfolio standard by 2020. So if you take a look, for example, at the bottom part of that slide, you can see the composition of our renewable supply mix in 2010, I believe. Oh, I'm sorry, 2002. The middle one is 2011, which shows where we are today. And then the last pie graph is the 2020 pie graph that shows what our renewable composition will look like in 2020. So by 2020, we should be at 33% renewable supplies that qualify under the state's definition. It doesn't include large hydro greater than 30 megawatts. So if you were to add up the 33% that's represented by the far right pie with our large hydro greater than 30 megawatts, as well as our nuclear plant that is not renewable but is greenhouse gas free, we'll have about 66% of our total supply that's in the form of carbon-free resources. And then the other third will be various types of primarily natural gas because, as Kenton mentioned correctly, as you integrate more intermittent renewable supplies on the grid, you do need to continue to add different types of either storage or flexible generation capacity in order to be able to balance the grid. Getting back to Richard's comments also about the need to ensure reliability as we do continue to add renewable supplies. The one thing I wanted to point out, though, in the bottom right-hand pie graph is the fact that by the time we get to 2020, based on contracts we've executed so far, we expect to have about 40% of our RPS supply be in the form of solar, which is actually very significant. I'm not aware of any other utility that'll be at a percentage, if you multiply the 33% times the 40%, of around 13.5% of their total energy mix that's made up of solar. California is well endowed with solar energy, and so we're very happy that that, in fact, is where we expect to be. And by the way, this doesn't count all the rooftop systems that our customers have installed, which is getting close to 75,000 rooftop systems today. But it does show that California, being the Sunshine State, in fact, will be living up to the promise as we get further out into the decade. But again, the intermittent nature of renewable supply does require us to look for other types of strategies to help better make sure that we can balance the grid as, again, the intermittency is going to become a more prominent factor as we get further into the decade. Just two other quick things that I'll mention that I don't have slides prepared on. One is that our customers, again, as environmentally considerate as you are, in some respects are looking for us to go further. And we know that there are discussions on the public policy agenda to go past 33%, and we're fully prepared to engage in those. In the meantime, though, we have proposed to the Public Utilities Commission a green tariff, which is essentially a voluntary type of approach for customers that want to be able to buy or support additional renewable supplies beyond the percentages that we will be providing. So we're working through that procedural process and hope that we'll emerge sometime in the first or second quarter with a green option for customers who want to participate. And then the second thing that was alluded to earlier that I think is very key, which is that as we continue to, again, decarbonize the energy mix on the electric grid, and as electric vehicles become somewhat more prominent, we believe this is a great synergistic opportunity to be able to use clean electricity to help decarbonize the transportation sector. So I'll leave that there, turn it over to Barbara, and then be available for your questions. Thank you.
And just a reminder to get those blue cards in. I only have 2, so I'm making up questions. Our last speaker is Barbara Hale. She's the Assistant General Manager of Power Enterprise at the San Francisco PUC. She oversees all aspects of sales of 1.6 billion kilowatt hours to retail and wholesale customers, including power purchases, development of energy efficiency and renewable programs, and the maintenance and operations of streetlights and the city's electric systems.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. I think we're all anxious to get out of here and see the game. I wanted to first of all say thank you to the Bay Planning Coalition folks for including the PUC in the proceedings today. Wanted to let you folks know, first off, if I could get this to cooperate with me. There we go. You know, we're sort of the other little utility in San Francisco. You know, everyone's familiar with PG&E's service provision in Northern California. We serve San Francisco's municipal load. So we are a wholesale customer of PG&E's. We purchase transmission and distribution services from PG&E to the tune of about $16 million a year in services from PG&E. And are the provider of electric services to those critical city and county functions, our airport, municipal transit, schools, libraries, recreation facilities, water and wastewater facilities. They're 2 of our biggest customers. You can see the data here. You know, we're generating 5 megawatts of solar from a solar system we have in San Francisco within the Sunset District, if you know San Francisco very well. On top of one of our concrete capped reservoirs, we have about 12 football fields worth of solar panels. It's pretty impressive if you drive by. And we have, like East Bay Mud, we have been generating electricity in our wastewater plants using the methane for many years, about 3 megawatts at our 2 wastewater treatment facilities. As an organization, we've been very fortunate to have a real physical, if you will, nexus between water and power, in that we began operating a water and power system after authorization in 1914 by the U.S. Congress to construct the Hetch Hetchy water and power system. It's operated under a Water First program where we optimize generation as a sort of secondary byproduct of the flowing of water to meet our customer needs. We've taken that early ethic, that early sustainability ethic that's embodied there, in the fact that it's a gravity-driven system. So we heard other speakers today talk about how much energy is consumed moving water. While that's very true for most California water providers, it's decidedly not true for San Francisco. We have water flowing to our residential and commercial customers in San Francisco, to our wholesale customers in 4 counties here in the Bay Area, serving about 2.6 million customers from a system where the water moves predominantly by gravity. You can't get much more sustainable than that. So we're taking that historic advantage and building on that as we invest in our systems, our water, our power, our wastewater systems, really keeping a sustainable focus. And just a couple quick examples of that. We have recently constructed a new headquarters building by changing from a renter to an owner in San Francisco of our headquarter building. We're saving our ratepayers substantial funds over the life of the building. We've constructed that building with solar on the roof, with integrated wind turbines, with a living machine that processes on-site our wastewater. It's an incredibly efficient building in terms of its lighting and HVAC systems. It's a LEED Platinum facility. We're really trying to demonstrate the kind of practices that we want to see our customers adopt in our headquarter building. We have solar on the roof of some of our new treatment facilities. We are optimizing our pumping as we improve our system, our water treatment facilities, our wastewater treatment facilities, to make sure that we are consuming the minimum amount of electricity possible. We're investing in renewable generation, focused on trying to make sure we are achieving the right mix of reliable renewables. Kent talked about the fact that, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. Well, one of the examples that I wanted to dive into a little bit deeper in our brief time together is the in-pipe hydro that we've been focusing some of our study and implementation efforts on. So what I have pictured here is, to give you an overview of sort of the context, it's a flyover of our University Mound north and south concrete capped reservoirs in San Francisco. You can see, it's near a park, residences, nursery schools. It's a densely populated area of San Francisco, lots of activity. At that site, we have some of that pressure reduction need that David talked about. One of the incentive programs that David mentioned on the bottom right of his slide was that pressure reduction program. Well, we have in our water system a lot of pressure release valves. We're evaluating all of those for conversion to in-pipe hydro, where we can install within the system, instead of a water pressure release valve, generation. So instead of just releasing that pressure, generating electricity. It's not a newfangled high-tech, new coming technology thing. This is old school technology, but we're not seeing it taken up that much. We were chatting at lunch, some of us, about the silos we're all in. It was the power folks at the SFPUC talking with the water folks to say, hey, there's an opportunity here. And it does take some overcoming of sort of your internal inertia and your old habits to adopt a new approach like this. The University Mound Hydro is going to be about 240 kilowatts. It's going to be a more expensive system than future of our projected projects will be. It's relatively small. It's the first one we've done. We're spending more time in development than we typically would. But we're looking at a good, strong payback, 5 cents a kilowatt hour power over the long term. We're looking at additional opportunities on our system. We have a Calaveras small hydro possibility. We have our San Joaquin pipeline small hydro possibility. These are all in the 1 megawatt to 5 megawatt size systems. they're near load. That's another aspect of them that makes them much more sustainable. We're not talking about putting generation far away from load and then having to build transmission to get it to consumers. We're talking about, putting systems right where the consumption's happening, avoiding those additional investments. So that's another sustainable aspect of it. We talked at the start of the panel, it's supposed to be this sort of question about, is it energy efficiency? Is it renewables? For San Francisco, it's both, but it's definitely a priority on energy efficiency and reducing demands first, and then meeting demands in the most renewable way possible. Didn't talk about the community aggregation program. There may be questions about that. Happy to engage in that if so. It's a new program we're implementing, 100% renewable program for customers who choose to pay more for a premium product and receive their generation component of their electric services at their homes and businesses from the SFPUC. So with that, hopefully we can have a good dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, our first question is for Richard, and it has to do with the 33% goal. It says, it appears not to distinguish between peak and base power. If this assumption is correct, will the PUC redefine the renewable power goal to be base power?
Well, I think, I believe that the renewable portfolio standard really is based on energy and not necessarily on when the energy comes. So I don't think there are any plans to actually change that, and I don't see any changes.
Okay. Thank you. Here's an associated one that I was thinking about. David, you talked a little bit about peaking and the fact that, if we can get that under control, then we're in good shape. Was it David or was it Kent? David, okay. How does time of use metering play into that, and what's the latest on time of use?
I was going to try to figure out an artful way to not use the term smart meter, but so it's a great technology. Most of our customers at this point, hopefully those of you in this audience amongst them now, have a smart meter on your building or have opted out under the PUC authorized program. So the technology will in fact enable more precise, more granular pricing signals that will in fact help customers at least recognize that peak power, peak periods have a higher price associated with them, and that responding to the price signals and using some of the technologies that we promote under the different types of programs that I mentioned, we will be able to work with our customers to help them, again, either reduce their peak usage and or shift usage from the peak periods into the less expensive off-peak periods. So it's a very powerful technology. It's just now really, in many respects, kind of finishing up in terms of us installing them on our customer facilities. On a slightly slower track, though, will be the introduction of different types of time of use rates. So for our larger commercial industrial customers, those of you in this room, you've been on time differentiated pricing plans for quite some time. But if you're a smaller business and or residential customer, you may not have, but it is coming to a theater near you soon. And we're working in order to try to make sure that the program is being implemented in a way such that we have the opportunity to work very closely with all of you to help you respond to the pricing signal, so it doesn't become just a burden, but in fact becomes an opportunity to be able to help you better manage your energy use.
Thank you. This is a question originally for Kent, but I got another one that was the same question for everybody. So I'd love to hear your opinions on, is nuclear energy a real option in California? If so, how and when?
Go right on.
Yeah. Smart meters. No. Nuclear power exists today in the United States and is a fairly significant part of the portfolio mix. In California, obviously, Diablo Canyon, the San Onofre, and to an extent, the Palo Verde nuclear plants in Arizona. So nuclear power is in the mix today. My best answer to that is if you truly believe in global warming and greenhouse gas efficiency, then new hydro and probably nuclear power has to play a role if not in 20 years, in 50 years, and if not in 50 years, in 100 years. So the question really comes to when is it economic and when can the security issues associated with nuclear power be solved? 3 years ago, I'd have a slightly different answer, which was real soon, but I was scheduled to be in Japan the week of the earthquake, and that scared me a bit. We canceled that trip to Japan and ended up going someplace else. But I had assumed that the nuclear program in Japan, which was quite advanced, was secure and safe. And, tsunamis and other things notwithstanding, I didn't expect the problems that they had. So I don't know that I have a good answer for it. But if you truly believe in a carbon-free future, I think nuclear power does have a role, and I think it has a place.
Anybody else? Thoughts on nuclear?
I told you they weren't.
Yeah, they don't want to touch it.
Well,
They just barely did the smart meters. I know.
So I'll say a thing or two. State law right now already says you can't have more nuclear. You have to solve the waste problem before the state of California will allow another nuclear facility in the state. So there's the security issue, as Kent had mentioned, but there's also the waste issue that's keeping it from happening. But yeah, it's a carbon-free resource. So the state's going to have to come to terms with that.
The next set of questions for Barbara have to do with, does the SFPUC have a return on investment criteria, and do your energy recovery generation projects meet these criteria? So basically around project justifications.
Yeah, so for our solar investments we've made so far, we have not applied a project-by-project hurdle like that. We have such a low-cost hydro resource that when we blend that low cost with a higher cost of solar, it still makes sense for us on a portfolio basis. So we sort of clear that economic hurdle by looking at it holistically. And I'm sorry, was there another piece to the question, or did I cover it?
That was one piece, actually. There's a you answered that question. The other question was, what's the total operating budget for the San Francisco PUC?
Ooh, for the whole PUC, I'll have to get back to you on that. We operate the water, wastewater, and power, so.
So we'll get copies of all these questions to the panelists, and we'll make sure we have answers that we'll get back out to folks. Public goods surcharge. Question about the public goods surcharge. David, I know PG&E's done a lot of work around energy efficiency, and I don't have the facts at hand, but I bet you do about how much, equivalent power customers have been able to save by just implementing efficiency over the last, say, 15 years.
Funny you should ask.
That's one of the slides you didn't include, huh?
I have it as backup. So, we do have, you all as customers help contribute to these programs. They are included in your rates. Roughly speaking, out of our system average rate of around 15 cents a kilowatt hour, about 1.2 cents a kilowatt hour is for what is called our public goods charge. And so, it's a significant part of the rates that you all pay, and it's an important part of the fabric of California energy policy that, again, we do prioritize consuming less and or consuming energy more efficiently before adding new supply. The numbers that I do have, by the way, are the total savings that we have been able to realize through different types of programs from 2006 till the present. And it's a number that may not be particularly meaningful to you. It's about 10 terawatt hours a year. But to put it into context, our total system load is about 80. So we've been able to save roughly about 12.5% of the energy consumption of our total customer base as a result of the programs that we've had in place for the last 6 years. And to give you another number that might be helpful as well, between now and the end of the decade, we expect energy use to increase by about 0.8% per year. So again, that number is significant because even as the economy rebounds, knock on wood, through aggressive implementation of these programs, we hope to be able to continue to keep energy consumption at a relatively modest growth level. One other interesting factor that might, again, put things in context is if you look at the sum total of the energy efficiency programs that we've had really for the last 30 years, And harken back to right after the first oil crisis in the mid-1970s, the U.S. has seen an increase in electricity consumption of around 50% relative to the consumption levels that were in place in the mid-70s, whereas in California it stayed flat. So you can't attribute all of that necessarily to conservation, but I would say it was a very important element of the statewide, again, success in keeping energy consumption levels at the same levels they were at 30 some odd years ago.
I have an answer to the question, which was annual budget. Our annual operating budget is $700 million, with 2,300 employees.
So we're a little early, but I'm sure folks won't complain about that this afternoon. But I do want to give the panelists a chance to just give kind of closing remarks on what they've heard today on the panel. This was not nearly as contentious maybe as the last panel, but I still find it. Oh, there is one last question. What can you say to an out-of-state potential business interested in moving to California to convince them that power is reliable?
I have one answer to that.
Go ahead, Kent.
If reliable means less expensive than someplace else, then they need to go someplace else.
Let me add on to that, though.
Yeah, please. But in terms of reliability, California has a reliable system. PG&E, Edison, municipal electric utilities have a tremendously good record in reliable power.
And also, I'd also say if you look at our electricity rates, they look high, but if you look at the cost of the service that's provided, I think it's reasonable compared to the other costs in the California economy. So we paid less as a percentage of our GDP in electricity rates than many other states. So that's actually an advantage that I think we have.
And then one additional note, actually, both piggybacking on what Richard just said, but I'll raise one other fact, and that is we do work very closely with our customers in order to be able to help them reduce their bills, as opposed to just simply looking at the rate. We think that it is important to look at what your total bill will be, and through many of the programs that I've mentioned, again, we hope to be able to help you better manage your total bill. We also have a proposal in front of the Public Utilities Commission, still subject to PUC approval, for an economic development rate to help customers that are considering out-of-state locations, either if they're here and they're looking to move, or if they're outside the state and looking to come in, where we may be able to offer you a targeted rate reduction in order to help you make the location decision to come to California. So see me afterwards.
That's great, because I know that's what a lot of other states do, and it feels like it's not a real level playing field, so hopefully that would help to make the playing field a little more leveled out.
You want to be a witness in the proceeding?
No witnessing for me, thank you, though. It'd just be my opinion. You all were good. You didn't ask Barbara any questions about the Hetchy proposition that's on the ballot, and that's because she can't answer it. She can only answer facts, not opinions. But if you could just take a minute to close on your closing thoughts on the panel. Richard?
Yeah, we were asked to talk about how you value supply versus conservation, or actually in the energy world, we think about efficiency as a technological solution and conservation as a behavioral solution. And I think Barbara said it both best, and it's really an all of the above solution. Barack Obama's got it right. It's all of the above.
And I approve this message.
And I approve this message.
Good?
Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah. I didn't talk too much about conservation, but a couple of ideas. Sometimes you can look at conservation as being do without, do it more efficient, or do it at a different time. I don't like the solution of do without. I think industry and businesses and others, notwithstanding the residential side of the world, they don't want to do without. They want their TVs and their air conditions and their processes and electric energy and power to be available to them all the time. But to do it more efficiently, absolutely, and to invest in those technologies, absolutely. To do it at a different time, like what we saw with renewables, storage, shifting demand, the peak issues in the state of California, those are all very important. And quite frankly, if you're going to have industry, you need it to be industry and jobs. You need to have an efficient infrastructure, an infrastructure that's affordable, and an infrastructure that is flexible, that can respond to requirements over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Those are the decisions that people are making.
Giants in 6. I'm sorry, what was the question?
507, I think.
I know that I'm probably going to sound like I'm repeating what Richard said, but I think he laid out the trilemma that we do face fairly well, and I think it's important to acknowledge that we do want a lot here, and sometimes it involves making critical trade-offs that are challenging to be able to attach a value to which is more important amongst the different things that are important, that are critical to us, such as reliability, environmental impact, and cost. But it makes it an interesting endeavor because because we do live in a state that truly values impacts of various types of decisions on the environment for better or for worse, and it puts in front of us again a real, hopefully, opportunity to be able to come up with a solution to the objective function that we have, which is to try to achieve all 3 objectives at the same time.
And I guess in closing, I would just say, what we're talking about is the provision of essential services and the quality of life impacts that the choices for how we provide them cause. I'm fortunate enough to have been born here in California, smart enough to have chosen to stay, and I think those are why do you stay? It's the quality of life, it's the beauty, it's everything. And I think a lot of the regulations and a lot of the policies are very much focused on trying to maintain that quality of life, not just for us, but for future generations, and trying to get the balance right. There is no benign technology, no environmentally benign technology. Everything costs something, and they're all going to have different capabilities to provide reliable service. So it's getting that balance right with the overall focus of the quality of life and maintaining it.
Great. Thank you to the panelists for taking times out of their busy days to join us. Barbara, David, Kent, and Richard. Thank you.
Thank you.